Write like a man. Use a typewriter.
Well, I'd like to ask you about Hollow Earth. So, pretend I'm a total noob,
a total normie, not into anything cool.
A normie, yeah.
Never.
Pretend I'm an accountant, and I have followed that path all my life. And how would you describe the theory of Hollow Earth, and why would someone like hypothetical me want to even consider it? Like, what's there?
All right, so the Hollow Earth theory goes back a long ways. We're talking hundreds of years. I think it might have been Kepler who first postulated on the idea of the Earth being hollow with concentric spheres within. But the theory wouldn't really take off until the 1880s. It was replete throughout literature of the time, literature that was trying to pass itself off as true stories. Things like The Smoky God by Olaf Jensen, books like Edda Dorfa, The Strange Journey, Vril, The Coming Race, Journey to the Center of the Earth. You know, these books were speaking of subterranean worlds inhabited by intelligent beings. At the same time, there was a man named John Cleve Sims Jr. who had postulated that there were openings to this hollow earth at the poles. And he took every penny he could get his hands on to pay for postage, to write to every prince, parliament, and president in the world to try to raise money for a hollow earth expedition to the South Pole. Now, he never achieved that goal, but what he did do was a lecture tour around these United States to spread his hollow earth theory. He would print pamphlets, he would do these lectures. He even had a globe made to use as a prop in his presentation, featuring the openings at the poles. And his tombstone, to this day, no doubt, is a globe with a big hole in it. Now, why should anyone believe in this hollow earth theory? I don't think anybody should. I don't propagate anything for the purpose of trying to convince people to believe in it. Nor do I debunk anything. So I try to stay on that middle ground where it's your choice to accept or reject any of the information I present. Yeah. But for me, the hollow earth is so fanciful, so fantastic when we talk about an inner civilization on this earth that has its stuff together in a way that we don't here on the surface.
Yeah.
A fantastic city called Agartha, or refugees from ancient continents like the Muria inhabiting this inner world, perhaps intermingling with extraterrestrials using advanced technologies. Maybe there are extinct creatures from the surface still alive down there, like woolly mammoth or rhinoceroses. You know, it opens the door to fantastic possibilities. At the same time, there's a lot of new age kind of theosophical beliefs that creep into the hollow earth over time. You get the idea of it being the home of the ascended masters, with the chief among them being Sanat Kumara, the king of the earth. This kind of ethereal being that has transcended the mundane of our mortal lives and become something more ethereal, something bigger, a spiritual creature. And at the same time, some of these ascended masters are still physical, like the Count of Saint Germain, who is a famous immortal. He's also counted among these ascended masters. And all that comes from theosophy and the works of Helena P. Blavatsky, who really is kind of foundational when it comes to talking the Western esoteric tradition. She brings a lot of the beliefs from the East to the West in an age where people were ripe for spiritualism. Yeah. And her exploration into these different occult sciences would ripple throughout the decades, and people would be referencing her work or incorporating her ideas into all manner of belief systems over the years.
And she kind of was the harbinger, the bridge between the old world, sort of new age philosophies and into the Western world in a lot of ways, it seems, because she's referenced a lot. We always see her reference. I just I would love the idea of there being a hollow earth with an inner Earth with this just vast array of different, it just the possibilities are endless. Like your imagination, like as a writer, your imagination can just like go wild.
Sure,
You know?
yeah.
I had always like wanted to go back and redo the first Heavenly Realms novel instead of it being set in heaven, have it be that pre-Adamic world where like Lucifer is given control over everything, and then he decides to keep it for himself, and there's the rebellion, and then they have to like go into the earth to survive, because there's all that.
Cool. That's cool. I like that.
Right? Like it's all in that mythology too, that especially Greek mythology of Hades and Tartarus, and it's replete throughout civilization. So
yeah, and I'll tell you that what's interesting to me about what's under the surface of the earth is that we have not explored it at all. Not really. Well, we've drilled down maybe like 8 miles. It's 4,000 miles to the core.
Yeah.
And they speculate that it's, there's the crust, there's the mantle, there's the core. They don't know that. They don't know. Yeah. But it's settled science.
Right.
And I'm a contrarian. So anytime I'm told what to believe and there's really no good evidence or proof to support what I'm supposed to believe, and I'm told it's settled science, I'm like, no, there's probably something else there. Yeah. And the great thing about it, we've been to the moon, we've been, you think about exploration, and imagination is what has driven exploration and discovery, not being told, nope, that's where the world ends. There's no more of it.
Oh,
right. Yeah. And I think I don't think it's anything like what we see in the little, Earth dissection diagrams. There's got to be something down there. And what was really interesting too, I was reading through the Book of Enoch, and one of the visions that he has. All of it's, he's going to all these different, astral and spiritual places, and, hell, or he's going to Tartarus, he's going to, heaven, he's seen all these places. And then he says, and then I went to a place where there was a mountain, and it was made out of solid rock. And it was divided into 3 or 4 chambers, and that's where the souls of the dead were. He was describing Hades, and it was the only place in his visions where he described as being solid.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. And I thought that it was interesting that the chambers of the dead or whatever was under the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do Hollow Earth theories always kind of start with the idea that the entrances are the poles? Could there not be other entrances?
Well, there are other entrances that are speculated. You'll see various Hollow Earth maps that might point to some of these different openings. Some believe there's an opening at Giza, somewhere near the pyramids. Others believe there's an opening at Mammoth Cave.
I've been there. I've been in the cave.
Very deep cave. Yeah. There's also a belief there's an opening in the Nahane Valley in Canada. Up in the Great Continental Divide that exists up there, there's a belief that there is an entrance to this Hollow Earth. It really was this John Cleve Sims, the aforementioned lecturer, who cooked up the idea of the poles being the place where you could get into this Hollow Earth. So before him, there really wasn't much in the way of discussion about that. This was really his brainchild. Then, we get stories from World War II that make it all the more stranger. Obviously, the Germans were down there. They were conducting recon for perhaps a military establishment. Some say they did establish a military base down there that was still in operation after the war, which is where Admiral Byrd comes in, an Operation High Jump, where they sent a contingent of military personnel down to the Antarctic for some purpose, but they wound up losing a couple planes, a couple boats sank. They limped back here, talking about craft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. So perhaps there was some Hollow Earth activity going on there that raises more questions than answers. It just really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the so Admiral Byrd, I remember Operation High Jump. Later on, it was discovered in his his journals, his diaries, later on, that he had that experience where he believes he may have flown into, what we describe as Hollow Earth, and he sees these crafts.
Right.
But I was under the understanding that was at the North Pole and not the South Pole. Do you know for certain?
I
I've heard both
believe it
sides.
was the South Pole, because there really is there's no continent on the North Pole. North Pole's just ice,
Yeah.
There's no landmass under it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The South Pole has landmass under 2 miles of ice, nonetheless. But the North Pole's just icebergs, it's just floating ice.
Yeah.
So
And it was in
so no
and
landmass.
that happened too. His entry in his journals where he's describing that incident, he said that the flight log was February 19th, 1947. That's our dad's birthday, by the way.
Is it really?
Not to the year, but to the day of month.
Oh yeah.
But it was February 19th, 1947, where he took that flight.
Right.
And I just find that fascinating because 4 months later in Roswell, something crashes that, is identical to the description of Byrd's description of the flying craft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you've ever heard any theories about maybe the connection of those two events.
No, I can't say that I have. But it does open an interesting door if there is a connection between those two events.
Right.
And there might be some stranger connections to the UFO phenomenon. We mentioned Crowley a little earlier. He was in correspondence with another man named Jack Parsons.
Yes.
Who Jack
Beat me to
Parsons
it, baby.
himself.
Yep.
Rocket program.
He was in the rocket program. He was a practicing occultist. He was living in this flop house in the 40s in Pasadena, California, with L. Ron Hubbard, and they were having all this back and forth over this particular woman. They were spending money like ridiculous people and performing.
What was the name of his group? Was it Babylon Rising? Is
No,
that right?
The Babylon Working.
That's the ritual they
Thank you.
performed.
That's the ritual, yeah.
Yeah.
But he was involved with the OTO, I believe. The Ordo Templiaris Orientis. If
Are
I'm
they
saying that
connected
correct.
to Aleister Crowley?
Well, he was a
Yeah.
devotee of Crowley's, though, wasn't he?
You're right. Yeah.
Right. They were writing letters back and forth. They were in correspondence.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Right.
Did it get delivered by owl, like in the Potter movies?
Nah, it got delivered by Bigfoot. Maybe that's what that UFO that crashed was doing. Maybe it was like the messenger.
Dogman's at the mailbox chasing the mailman away.
But I've even heard speculation that the Babylon Working corresponds with the first UFO sightings. That it wasn't until the Babylon Working was done that you start seeing these things in the sky.
Yeah.
I disagree with that to an extent because of the great airship flap of the 1880s, and people were seeing something back then. Of course, there was the Aurora, Texas crash of 1891 and the Missouri River crash of 1885. So there were other incidents that predate this that kind of lead me in a different direction. But, it's fascinating nonetheless.